So Kenny, I know that you're primarily, not primarily, you're solely a French polish shop here, and that you don't use any of the lacquers or polyurethanes. And a lot of folks obviously have some reservations about French polish because of its delicacy, etc. But
rightfully so.
At the same time, there seems to be a balance. People are willing to put up with the delicate nature of the French polishing, and then balance that out with the fact that you get a superior sounding instrument.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's better. It sounds better, for sure, than any lacquer or poly or any other spray finish that I know of.
Can you tell us a little bit about the French polishing process?
Well, you can see it right there.
Yeah.
Do that for 15 hours or something.
Yeah. So, for our viewers, maybe you can kind of.
This is not the beginning stage. The wood has already been filled. The pores are filled with pumice and French polish. And pumice, it's kind of hard to believe because pumice just looks like baking soda or something. It's a white powder. But it's a mineral that, in fact, is kind of like ground glass or something. So that, in fact, once it's dissolved, it's translucent. It's not really white. But it gets pressed into the pores, and that's probably the most time-consuming thing of all, but to really level the wood to make it a nice glassy kind of slate-like surface. Now the pumice itself, I think, is a part of the finish because it's a mineral and it's essentially very hard, so it's kind of case hardening the wood. I don't know how to prove that, but and then the shellac goes on, and for some reason, just because of the nature of both the padding and the material itself of the shellac, the kind of resinous character of it, that it seems to just become one with the wood. And so it's ridiculously thin. I don't even know how to measure it when it comes down to it, but it looks lustrous and glamorous, as though it was very deep, but it's not. It's just a film. And so the trick is to getting it leveled, to getting all of those pores filled, and then to be using both the motion and the alcohol to be bringing up that luster. These guys have gotten really good at it. It takes a lot of practice, and then they make it look easy, but it's not easy. Now, it is a vulnerable finish. It's delicate in terms of like what happens with fingernails, or it's easy to scratch it, especially on the top, and it's vulnerable to heat. Like if it gets left in a hot car, the finish can take an imprint from a case or something like that. And it's, to some extent over time, it's vulnerable to, I guess, moisture, so that where your body contacts it, it can kind of dull out. But then at the same time, it's something that can always be gone back into. It can always be repaired. So if 30 years from now, you can take alcohol and shellac and get back in there and bring it right back up again. You can also somehow or another just take care of it, and it doesn't seem to need anything for a long time. And some people are better at that than others. I'm sort of in between, I'm not afraid of little scratches on the guitar, or that sort of thing. But of course, it's a big part of the time that goes in to making one of these guitars. We don't do any spray at all. Once upon a time I had a spray booth and I'd spray lacquer and all. But when the environmental inspector came here when we moved here, and he said, "So where's your spray booth?" I said, "We don't got one." And he was going to be able to charge me fees for that and for the monitoring of that. And it's like, there's no more, the only thing there is here is alcohol. It smells more like a martini than a spray booth, And so it's a very simple organic material and process. So this is the same guitar as this. It's really just exactly the same. And the same process, just that padding is going to go on. And by the time it gets done, it's all nice, you know? It's all glassy and shiny and beautiful, and it's just all done by, you know, continuing this process all the way through.
So Kenny, now we're getting into the final stages here of the setup. So what are some of the steps that you go through here to really dial this in?
Well, you know, after the bridge is glued on, you know, then it's time to finish it up. You make the nut, you put the tuners on, you make the nut, you make the saddle, and string it up. Now, one of the things that, so hopefully, you know, all the neck angle is right here, you know, that fingerboard projection is hitting the right target here in relation to the bridge height, and that's really important. That you know, the fretting is good, all the frets are level, you don't have any high ones, and you've got to go through and check for that. You can never just count on it, you always have to check. And if there's anything that needs to be dealt with, you deal with it either by tapping it or filing it or whatever. But then getting the string height correct at both the nut and at the 12th fret is what goes into its playability. Now the neck is already carved. The fingerboard has already been you know, given its relief or whatever it has. We still have the truss rod that we can use to adjust it if it's changed at all. And then, you know, the way that I measure, it's just so primitive, but the way that I measure bridge height or string height is like this. This is it's just a wedge. And see, there's 3.2 millimeters, there's 2.7 millimeters, and these are specs that we use. Now this is a little bit, and I just picked up this saddle. This is not made for this guitar yet. It could be made for this guitar, but it's just, I'm just grabbing it. But so this tells me that if I put a string on this guitar now, you see, it's essentially a string that's fretted at the first fret. It's not, there's no nut there. And if I put a string on this guitar, it's gonna play really good. It's gonna play too good for some people. It'd be perfect for me. I like the action to be low. But what we've got here is probably what's gonna happen is that this bone could probably be used just the way it is. Go ahead and make the nut, adjust the nut, string it up, and the neck is probably gonna come forward a little bit. And if it doesn't, because it's very straight now. It's very straight now. If it doesn't, you just use the truss rod and put that little bit of relief in it. And it's just a few thousandths, but and it's in neutral right now. So if I need to put relief on it, I turn it this way. And then that will make it so that this bone saddle here would probably just fit just the way it is. Now we also go into, I don't know if I can show you, without actually making a nut and saddle here. Could show it on a finished guitar. Well, we'd have to look at another, a finished instrument here. We also take the saddle and put a little zigzag on it, so there's a little bit of intonation that goes on with the bone. So it's this string is a little bit shorter than this string, and then again this string, so it slants back and then it slants back again. Then the D string is a little bit shorter than the E string, and in the up in the nut where the G string is, we put a little bit of intonation there also. Here, I don't know if you can see this, but this is in the saddle, and what it amounts to is that this will play a little bit flatter. This is the third string, this is the D string, here's the sixth E string. And so that tends to help intonation, because each string behaves differently. You know, the strings, they intonate differently. So if this were to go in there, and this it looks like it fits. I mean, it just could fit just like that. It's already been made for something. And then once the nut is made and slotted, aha, look at this. Yeah, so, okay, well that doesn't fit. This could be adapted, but you can see that I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's this little angle that's filed into the face of the nut, and what the effect of that is it actually brings the string in back about 1 millimeter. So that just for the 3rd string, you're adjusting this space, the distance of the 1st fret for only the 3rd string. And what I find that does, and it's really hard for me to wrap my head around, you know, you're making this space wider, but why that does what it does, I have a hard time articulating it. But what it does is that it makes it so both the G and the G sharp will be much better in tune. And don't ask me to try to explain any more than that. But you can tell if you, for instance, you take and you tune the guitar so that you've got a C chord playing very, very in tune, and then you change to an E chord. Usually, what you'll find is that G sharp is sharp. It's not in tune, if you do this, then you can get both of those notes to be in tune. Now, a G natural and a G sharp in 1st position of all the notes are very important, because guitar keys tend to be, you know, the sharp keys that have a G natural, or for instance the key of E and A, which are very much guitar keys, have that G sharp, and it's front and center. It's always there in 1st position. So being able to get it so that you've got that little adjustment is very, very cool. And so we do that in setting it up at both ends. The nut, I mean, well, this is just an example. It's not really a demonstration as such, but to adjust the nut height, we've got feeler gauges. Now, our fret wire is always the same. We use the same fret wire, so it would be different if it was different fret wires, but you just take and, you know, for the 1st string, it goes down to 54. 1st and 2nd, you go down to 54 thousandths, and so you just adjust it to that. Adjust it to the feeler gauge, and it'll be fine. It'll play fine, and it won't buzz. If the same thing, that, you know, the G has got to be at, and actually revising it upwards at about 58. These can be at 56. This can be at 58 thousandths. So we've got different feeler gauges for the different string heights, because again, the strings behave differently. Each one needs a separate adjustment here, but the idea is to get it as low as you can without buzzing. I mean, that's a very fundamental principle. So that it'll play easy. If it's too high down here, you'll know it. It'll play more difficult, and it'll be out of tune because you'll be stretching the strings. So that's the way that between those feeler gauges and this little gizmo here, we can get the setup bingo. You know, you can hit the target and know you've hit the target every time.
Well, it's obvious that you put a lot of care into these setups, and it certainly does show in the instruments. They're wonderful. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. You know, playability is really important to me as a player.
Yeah.
You know, as a player, I need it to be on my side. You know, I don't want the guitar to be a struggle. And so I think other people appreciate that too.
Kenny, thanks a lot for taking all the time and showing us around the shop. I know you're a busy man, and we really appreciate it. A lot of great information here that I think any viewer that comes out to the All Strings Nylon site will really like to dive into.
Now they can just make their own guitar.
Yeah.
They don't need one of ours.
Well, listen, we're again, thank you, and we're looking forward to getting a lot more of your performance in Signature Series guitars.
Thanks. I really love this work, and I love the instruments.
We can see it shows.
Yeah, thanks.